Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to KSWV Radio, 99.9 FM, 810 AM, streaming online at kswvradio.com. It is our distinct honor and privilege to be talking today with Linda Trujillo, the Superintendent of New Mexico Regulation and Licensing. Good morning, Madam Superintendent. How are you?
Good morning, Esteban. I am doing great, and it is just so lovely to see you.
Well, it's great to see you too. And I got to tell you, I just want to first start out by saying thank you. I know you've had a long, wonderful career in public service. You're a representative here in Santa Fe. You served us extremely well. And this is my first opportunity to interview you since then. And I just want to say thank you for your public service then, and thank you for what you're doing today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I would have not known 20 years ago that I would be implementing legal cannabis in the state of New Mexico.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know anybody thought about that. And here we are today. Being able to talk about it, and that's a great thing. So, legalization of adult use cannabis, we saw made its way through the legislature, signed into law by the governor. Many people just kind of wondering about the law and what's going to happen in New Mexico. Can you just kind of tee up the conversation for us here today?
Yeah, no, thank you, Esteban. So there's a couple of things that are happening. And for us, like the most prominent and important thing that we're working on is transitioning the medical cannabis program over to the regulation and licensing department. That is everything except for the registry. So if you're a medical patient or you're applying to be a medical patient, you're still going to apply through the Department of Health. They will maintain that responsibility. They'll have an advisory committee that will continue to review the types of illnesses that might grant you that authority to be a medical cannabis patient, and medical cannabis will continue to not be taxed. And so that's the Department of Health, but everything else is rolling over to us. And, moving a function from one agency to another requires a lot of planning. And we're bringing in a lot of folks. We just had another meeting again this morning to work out those details. My staff met yesterday. We called it a cannabis summit. We met in a big room. There were 7 of us, and we social distanced, and we worked on a timeline and the beginnings of what's called a smart sheet to lay out each of the tasks that people have to do. What's the timeline for those? Who's responsible for them? And how do we measure our progress? So there's a lot to do right now.
I can imagine. And if we could just take one step to kind of give some background information as to why the governor and the state of New Mexico thought it was important to legalize adult use cannabis.
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons that it was important. I think probably for many of us, the damage that's been done by the war on drugs to families and to people's lives has really been devastating. And, we still see people who end up in jail, end up in prison, end up having troubles getting a job, end up going to school because of really the use of regulated substances, cannabis being one of those. And so one of the things is just to remove that barrier. Not that, we just want everybody to willy-nilly use cannabis all day long, but we wanted to set it up in New Mexico so that it was properly regulated, so that we're keeping the health and safety of our New Mexicans, particularly that we're thinking about children, making sure that advertising and labeling and product creation doesn't look like a Jolly Rancher or a Tootsie Pop, right? We don't want this to be marketed and targeted towards our kids. And so in most states, they've legalized it via a voting initiative, where one day it's not legal and the next day it is. And with that, you're kind of running to catch up and come up with the regulations for that, to think about all those things that I just mentioned, where in New Mexico, we really wanted to do it this way. We wanted to do it not on a ballot initiative, but really to regulate it, give the department some time to strategically and with great thought think through what are the regulations that are needed, how do we ensure that we keep that health and safety of the public intact. And so that's why it's legalized. And of course, there's the other part of that, right? There's jobs, there's economic development. There's the ability for a small farmer in northern New Mexico who has access to an acequia to grow, maybe an acre of cannabis, or maybe build up a greenhouse and grow it in a greenhouse, or a farmer down in southern New Mexico who wants to grow it outside and has acres of land that they want to use. Maybe you've got a retail store in Las Vegas that wants to open up and sell to that community. So there's a lot of economic development opportunities throughout New Mexico, and that's the other side of it. The first side is the health and safety. The other part of that is the economic development.
We're visiting with Linda Trujillo, Superintendent of New Mexico Regulation and Licensing, talking about legalization of adult use cannabis. Superintendent, I can't help but think about your tenure as a school board member when you talk about making sure that this is regulated in the right way. And as you mentioned previously about the children, the concerns that you have about the advertising and such, how your experience is helping in this effort.
Thank you, Esteban. So it is a priority for me. I mean, it really, for me, is at the top of the list. But in addition to that experience in public education, when you're working in public education, you see the impacts of kids that are left without their parents. You see the impacts of kids that are impacted by that war on drugs. And so really the social justice piece of this actually is going to help our children. It actually will have a benefit for them. You can't think about how kids perform and how they're going to do in school if you don't think about the whole family and you don't think about the whole community. So yeah, I think all of that work that I've done in kind of, from early childhood to increasing graduation rates and everything in between, all of that comes into, and we work off of the experiences that we've had. So I never will put that to the side. It'll always be a part of anything I do.
Yeah, public education, there as a school board member, and then obviously state representative legislation, seems like this is right up your alley for this role. Now, let me talk to you. I've read in the news about a Cannabis Regulatory Advisory Committee. I've read about the Cannabis Control Division and a number of different important milestones that I believe your department is working on. Why don't we talk about, what is the Cannabis Control Division? Let's talk about that.
Thank you. So the law was changed to amend the Regulation and Licensing Department Act, and it added what's called the Cannabis Control Division, CCD. And the Cannabis Control Division will have full authority to license and to regulate the use of adult and medical marijuana, cannabis, in New Mexico. And it's kind of similar if you think about the Construction Industries Division. They oversee construction and building permits and licensing. Or Alcohol Beverage Control Division. They oversee alcoholic beverages and the licensing and the regulation and disciplinary action of that. The Cannabis Control Division will be the exact same thing.
Okay, fantastic. So that is the licensing, taxing, and enforcement regulatory organizational structure of that.
That's correct. Now, keep in mind, though, that taxation and revenue will do the taxing. So we're not going to be a part of that. We'll definitely share information with one another, but tax and rev will continue to do the taxation piece of it. We'll just do the licensing and the regulation of the producers, manufacturers, cannabis establishments, and such.
I know that this law was just signed into place, but is this division up and running, or are the pieces being assembled to that division at this point?
Yeah, I'm really excited about that, actually. We had our first hire start yesterday, Robbie Sachs. He will start officially this next Monday, but he was gracious enough to take the day and come and participate in our Cannabis Summit yesterday to be part of the early planning. He'll be the deputy for policy for the division, and that'll include overseeing the advisory committee, the development of rules, the public information aspect of it, communication plan, social justice, economic development. He'll be responsible for all those pieces of the cannabis division.
Okay, fantastic. Now, what is this advisory committee?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, this is a perfect time for me to explain that. The advisory committee is made up of 4 statutory individuals, particularly within the law enforcement. Those are going to be assigned just because they're listed in the statute. They can send a delegate, but they're assigned just by virtue of being in the statute. The remainder of the positions are experts in different areas, maybe maybe they're a labor union. It could be that they're a medical cannabis patient. It could be that they have health experience in cannabis. There's a whole list of experience levels that we're looking for. And we need to get that up and running ASAP. The statute says we don't have to have them up until September 1st, but we have so much to do before September 1st that we need them involved in. So we created a website the day after the Senate voted on the act, and we felt confident that the governor was going to sign the bill. And that website is up and running right now. And there we go. There it is. And one of the things that's really important about that website is that there's a link for the Cannabis Regulatory Advisory Committee. And the link is really self-explanatory. It's just down a little bit further on the page. There you see, it's like a orange colored. It says submit an application for Cannabis Regulatory Advisory Committee. And if you click on that link, it'll pull up an application with general contact information, your name, I think your address, your phone number, probably an email. And then there is, what county do you live in? And then there's a list of the types of individuals that we're looking for, and you may qualify for a number of them. So pick the ones that are that you'd like to serve under, and then there's a place there that you can tell us why you'd like to be in that position, and then you can upload a resume, a cover letter, something of that nature for us to consider you. We're going to have this link open and functional until May 3rd.
Okay.
And then we're going to collect them all. We're going to sit down, we're going to review them, and we're going to come up with some candidates. And then we'll begin the process of appointing them.
I'm looking at some of the questions that you have here to, vet or consider potential candidates, and talks about, of course, there's financial or other interests, that the standard conflict of interest question that's always asked for folks in public service, registered lobbyist, have you been found guilty of any criminal law or traffic violation? Seems like it's pretty much, standard type of questions that, folks have to answer.
Yeah, no, it was modeled after the application process that the governor has for all the other boards and commissions in the state, with the exception of the list of the qualifying positions for this board.
Okay. So the deadline to apply is, again, Monday, May 3rd?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So for those of you that are able to see this on the screen, there is the Cannabis Regulatory Advisory Committee application that you can find from the website, and fill it out, send it in with your resume, and be considered for that. So that's great. That's good to know. Thank you for that. How many people will be on this committee?
So it's about 15 people. The superintendent can actually appoint more people than are listed on this, if we feel like we need to bring other folks to the table. The difference is that they won't have a vote right? So the Cannabis Regulatory Committee is, I think it's 15, it may be 16 because there was one added as an amendment in the last hours of the bill. But it's right in that neighborhood, 15, 16 people. And then there can be additional, but they would be non-voting members.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm imagining a strong, interest by the public in something like this. So I'm imagining you're probably going to get quite a few applications for that. Once they submit their application May 3rd, then, there's, I don't know when you're going to, vet all of them and select the committee by, but do you know what that date is? Or what
Yeah,
you're
we're
calling?
hoping to have that done right away. So our new employee won't start until May 3rd. And
Okay.
so as soon as he starts, then one of the first things that he's going to help us do is to organize those. We'd like to have a diversity of experience. We'd like to have a diversity in region. We'd like to make sure that we're including people that have been, harmfully impacted by the war on drugs. So we've got a pretty high criteria that we're looking for. But as of yesterday, yesterday morning, I believe there was already 64 people who had applied. So
Wow.
there's absolutely a lot of interest by the public in serving on this, and we're pretty excited about that. I'm hoping that somebody from Santa Fe will apply that we can appoint.
Well, there you go. Absolutely. Shout out to folks here in Santa Fe to apply. We are visiting with Linda Trujillo, Superintendent of the New Mexico Regulation and Licensing, and we're talking about the legalization of adult use cannabis. Now, Madam Superintendent, I know that there are important dates and timelines and such. Do we want to talk about those now?
Yeah, those are really important deadlines for us. And one of the things, Estevan, that we did when the statute was when we were amending it and we were trying to make some changes that would be helpful for us in the implementation process, is that we changed the dates instead of like line in the sand dates that you have to start on a certain date. We wanted them to say no later than. And the reason that we want it to be no later than is that if we can get things accomplished, then, for example, the first deadline is that we have the committee appointed and that we begin accepting and processing applications for producers. Producers are the farmers. They will cultivate the cannabis. And the reason that we need to get those done now is because we need the advisory committee to help us with the rules. And the producers need to get seed in the ground in order for there to be sufficient amounts of cannabis once we go live with commercial cannabis. So the next date after that, so September 1 is really the date that we're pushing for. And we'd like to be early and get that ready so that we can move. I hate to put a date on it, but we're really shooting for the 1st of August at the very latest,
Okay.
middle of August, if not then. And then the next deadline is January. And what has to happen in January is then we start licensing everybody else. So that's going to be your manufacturers, potentially your testing laboratories, your retail stores, cannabis consumption areas, servers, anybody else beyond producer. We have to start licensing them no later than January 1st. The final deadline is the April one. And that one I really did want to be kind of a line in the sand, because when I did the math about how long it was going to take us to do public notice, have those rules out for review for a minimum of 30 days, and then have the hearing, compile the information, make non-substantive adjustments to the rules, file the rules, have them published. It's really a pretty comprehensive process. And in order to do that, we felt like April 1st was the earliest that we could have commercial cannabis available for the public to purchase. And there was a lot of push to make it sooner than that. Like there was questions, oh, why can't you do it now? Well, because there's all these things that we have to do. You have to do them right, and the public has to be a part of it, and there has to be transparency. And so, although I really tried that to be a line in the sand, I did agree that, you know what, and actually it was Senator, my very own Senator Rodriguez, who said, well, if you can get it done, is there any possibility that you could make it happen before? And so we agreed to make it no later than. So there's a push for us to allow commercial cannabis to be sold before April 1st, but it cannot be any later than April 1st. So we'll be watching and seeing how the production's happening, how the manufacturers going. We'll be kind of keeping an eye on all of that, and maybe we will make a decision that we can sell it commercially before April 1st.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We're talking with Linda Trujillo, Superintendent of New Mexico Regulation and Licensing, talking about the legalization of adult use cannabis and some of the other issues that we're hoping to get into as well, Superintendent, are the local jurisdiction. I know that many folks might be wondering, what is it that my local jurisdiction can or can't do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the things that I kept in mind as we were kind of helping to amend this piece of the bill was that the work that we've done over here in the airport corridor, right? We've tried really hard, and I think many of your listeners are probably aware of the work that's been done to stop to make sure that we have access to food, to make sure that we have access to the things that we need as a family, and not to have multiple alcohol sales throughout that area. And so I had the same thought about we how do we make sure that what people call it is a green mile, that Airport Road or any other place in the state, but for me, Airport Road was really important because I just live right off of Airport.
Yeah,
Um,
you and I both.
yeah, yeah, and so that was important to me because it was important to my community. And so local jurisdictions can have some reasonable rules about time and place. They cannot prohibit the sale or the manufacture or the production of cannabis, but they can have some reasonable time and place. So maybe if you have alcohol sales, bars have to close by maybe 10 or 11. You could do the same thing. You could have hours that a cannabis retail facility could be open. You could ensure that they were at least, 2-3 blocks apart from one another, or that they could only be, a certain number within a certain range. So you can have those kinds of limitations. You also have to have the major limitation of no less than 300 feet. So it has to be at least 300 feet away from a school or childcare. And of course, that was important because again, one of the priorities is keeping our kids safe. And we don't want to have advertisements for cannabis visible for them while they're playing out in the playground. So that you've got that. But what local jurisdictions can't do, Esteban, is they cannot prohibit it from being in their community. They can't regulate signage differently than they would any other signage in their community. So those are kind of, there are some limitations on what a local jurisdiction can do, but they've got pretty good authority for what they can do.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we're coming close to the end here, but we're visiting with Linda Trujillo, Superintendent of New Mexico Regulation and Licensing, and I know, Superintendent, as we get closer and closer and closer to the day that legalization of adult use cannabis is allowed, where someone can just go buy cannabis, we'd love to have you on the program more and more
Thank you.
as these important dates come on. But I know that your time is going to be incredibly stretched, as it already is. So, but some of your final thoughts on perhaps the maybe overall mission, maybe just your final thoughts on the whole legalization of adult use cannabis.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a couple of things I try to remind folks. One is local jurisdictions. Now's the time to start thinking about how you're going to have those, how you're going to take authority of the limited controls that you do have. For for the rules, I encourage the public to watch our website. We keep adding new information all the time. So keep track of that. And when we go out for public comment on rules, we really are going to be looking for public comment. We'd like you to be involved. And as we do get closer and closer to the time when more things happen, I'd love to come back onto the show. Part of the way that we have determined the best way to get the message out to the public so that there's not misinformation out there is to try to get onto as many different area, radio, TV, newspapers as we can, and be available for questions. So if there's an opportunity for the public to ask questions, I'm open for that too, Esteban. And I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for allowing me this time to be on and to share with the public. And, I love Santa Fe. It's my heart. It's my home.
Well, we've been visiting with Linda Trujillo, Superintendent, New Mexico Regulation and Licensing, talking about the legalization of adult use cannabis. Superintendent, really have appreciated your time, clarifying not only different issues, but where people can go to for information. And we went ahead and let that know for our radio listeners out there. The Cannabis Control Division, if you just Google New Mexico Cannabis Control Division, you'll be able to find the site at the top of the results search bar there. But if you are good at remembering URLs, ccd.rld.state.nm.us, that's a mouthful. Just Google it, and it'll take you right there, right?
It is not an easy address, is it?
well, we just Google anything out nowadays.
Right. Right.
But thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
You.
And have yourself a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Best wishes to you and your family.
Thank you. Same to you.